Hey, it's Joe, and let me remind you before we get started with today's story to subscribe to 10 Minute Murder if you have not done that already. What happens when you subscribe is you get the episodes as soon as they are released, without delay. As soon as I upload them, boom, you've got them. And second, it ensures that you don't miss any episodes. So wherever you're listening right now, if you aren't subscribed, make sure you hit the button. It may not always say subscribe. It could say collect, subscribe, or follow.
10 Minute Murder contains depictions of actual crimes. What you are about to hear is real and violent in nature. Discretion is advised. This is 10 Minute Murder.
Welcome to 10 Minute Murder, the brief and bingeable true crime podcast. Hi, I'm Joe, the host, and thank you for being here. A reminder, you can send me stories by emailing them to 10minutemurder@gmail.com. That's a quick and easy way, or if you're connected with 10 Minute Murder on social media, you can do it there too. And today's story comes from one of those submissions, and I almost didn't do it. It's such a huge story. There's so many different details to talk about. There have been podcasts about it. There have been TV shows about it. There have been books written about it, both about him and by him. But in the end, I decided that it's too interesting of a story to not do one on. So it was a good submission. The story we're talking about today is a serial killer as cold-blooded as they come. It's an interesting case because his own family believes he's guilty of way more than he actually has been accused of. And when the daughter of the killer heard about the series of crimes called the Sweetheart Murders, she put the clues together and realized that her father was the one responsible. She also remembers being a child, forced to watch videos relating to the Zodiac Killer, when he would scream, "That's not how it happened." She believes he's responsible for those murders too. This is serial killer Edward Wayne Edwards. Edward Wayne Edwards was born in Akron, Ohio in 1933. Growing up in an orphanage after his mother committed suicide, he said that he suffered physical as well as emotional abuse at the hands of the orphanage nuns. The nuns asked him at one point what he wanted to do when he grew up. He told them he wanted to be a criminal. Edward had a rough childhood and landed himself into juvenile detention after a series of burglaries. He was allowed to leave there by saying he wanted to join the Marines. Once he joined, though, he went AWOL and was kicked out, a dishonorable discharge. He traveled frequently during his 20s and 30s, working assorted jobs such as a ship docker, vacuum cleaner retailer, and handyman. As you'll hear from his daughter in a moment, Ed Edwards was always working one con or another. In 1955, Edwards escaped from a jail in Akron, where he was serving time for another burglary conviction, and drifted around the country robbing gas stations. He wanted to become famous, so he never disguised himself during those crimes. In 1961, he found himself on the FBI's 10 Most Wanted. After his 1962 capture, he was placed into Leavenworth, where he was paroled in 1967. Edwards claimed that the influence of a compassionate guard at Leavenworth reformed him. He married and became a motivational speaker. Edwards appeared on 2 different TV shows, To Tell the Truth and What's My Line. He wrote an autobiography, The Metamorphosis of a Criminal, the true life story of Ed Edwards, that was published in 1972. And using that book, he made a living as a motivational speaker, which was his newest con. By 1982, he had returned to crime and was imprisoned in Pennsylvania for 2 years for arson. Here's his daughter April talking about her early life with a serial killer father.
He was very strict. He came across as a very loving father, loving husband, supportive. We were poor. I didn't even realize how poor we were until I got a little bit older. But we always found places to live that were inexpensive or that my dad could fix up to get free rent. He was a handyman. He traveled around, and that's how he supported the family, was doing odd jobs here and there.
Did you move around a lot? Were you in the same places for quite a while? Or
We didn't stay in one place for very long. I think I calculated I had been to 16 different schools throughout from starting kindergarten through my senior year. So I truly believe almost every place that we lived, my dad killed someone. Because every place we lived, we talked about some one being killed. And we always left so quickly. My mom was definitely at a loss. My dad very much manipulated her and abused her, and she was a beaten woman.
When it came to Ed's cons, what do you know about them?
He was always on the hunt for a new con. Didn't matter if you were his neighbor, a family member, the owner of the grocery store. He was always looking to con someone. And he was excellent at it. I'm not in any way condoning that, but he was excellent. People didn't even realize they were being conned. And detectives and police officers that I talked to, that if he would have used those attributes for the other side of the law, he would have been one hell of a police officer.
What's the first crime you remember him being accused of?
The first crime that I remember him being accused of, not doing, but being accused of, would be the arson. I believe my father, for some reason, was upset with the landlord, and he proceeded to try to burn the home down that we were living in, and we just picked up and headed to Atlanta. Nothing out of the ordinary in my life. That was the way he did things. We always left town. We knew why we were leaving town. Dad had done something.
That was a common thing, wasn't it?
Yeah, that wasn't the first home he burnt down of ours, and we knew it. He actually had my brothers help him. They were in elementary school and had them help him set the logs up. And my brothers were pretty devastated. But what are you going to do? You do what your father says.
Between 1974 and 2009, Edwards lived in more than a dozen different states when not in prison. According to his daughter April, many times he was using a fake name. In a 1993 letter to the FBI that was found in his papers, Edwards requested his criminal and history records for cities in 19 states. He claimed that J. Edgar Hoover more or less gave him permission to proceed with his 1972 autobiography after, quote, I assured him there would be nothing bad in it about the FBI. And he was writing a new book about criminals he had met while incarcerated, such as Tony Provenzano, Charles Manson, and Jimmy Hoffa. Although neighbors described him as pleasant and neighborly, in 2009, Edwards was arrested for murder in Louisville, Kentucky. In 2010, he pleaded guilty to the murders of Billy Lavaco and Judith Straub. They had both been shot in the neck with a shotgun. He also pled guilty to killing Tim Hack and Kelly Drew, both of Jefferson, Wisconsin. Their bodies were found after they attended a wedding reception at a hall where Edwards worked as a handyman. She was raped and strangled, and Hack was stabbed. Soon after, in a jailhouse interview, Edwards confessed to killing Danny Law Gleckner, or Danny Boy. He had lived with the Edwards family for several years as an unofficial adopted son, and he looked up to Edward as a father figure. He killed Danny as a con to collect insurance money. In 2011, he was sentenced to death for that killing. Here is Edward discussing, among other things, the murder of Danny.
The kid that was killed, I told him that his ride will be coming, and there were some cigarettes in the bottom of the duffel bag. I said, you go ahead and get them out. And so, and Danny is squatted down, and he's taking his hand, he's going through the bottom of the duffel bag, trying to find the cigarettes. And I'm standing right here. And I have the sawed-off shotgun, and I ease it out of the bag while Danny's down there looking. And I put the shotgun kind of right here over his shoulder, right down here, easy, and I pulled the trigger. And it was a single shot. And so I put another shell in it, pulled it, the trigger, and he fell on over. So I then backtracked. I left him there, left the duffel bag there. And it was well covered. I mean, nobody could see it way back in there. And I backtracked, and we went back to the car, changed clothes, and I went on home. And as if nothing had happened. And my wife, as I said, didn't even know that Danny was in town. Well, he didn't know it was coming. He had he did not know that he was going to get shot. I didn't threaten him in any way. I felt bad, but apparently not bad enough that I kept from doing it. He was stealing from my children, and I'm very close to my family in that respect. And so I just let my mind. I'm not new to crime. I've been in crime all my life. Written that book there, and so I've been a criminal all my life, and so and I had made up my mind, I guess, a long time ago that I wasn't going to go back in a penitentiary for just anything. But no, I did not feel good about it, and I don't feel good about it now. Otherwise, why I would be asking for the death penalty? His family, what family he has, stepbrothers and stuff like this here. I don't think he has a mom and dad. They're entitled to the. Also, you got to remember something else too. I'm thinking also of my family. I have put my family through God knows what. They don't deserve it. They're good people. Danny's family, what he has, get closure. My family gets closure if their closure can be brought about. Because I have a different view on what closure really is. Is closure knowing the person who did it got caught and he's being sent to the penitentiary? Is that closure, or is closure if it were one of mine? Did my child say anything prior to dying? Did he ask for me? In other words, I would want to know what was going on at the very end. That would be the closure that's what I describe as closure in that respect, coming from a parent. But I did this. They've got the gun. They've got the shells. Danny lived at the house. I had the reason for it. I've told them what the reasoning was.
In March 2017, Detective Chad Garcia of the Jefferson County Sheriff's Office, who was in charge of the Sweetheart murders case, described how the murders of Hack and Drew were solved following a tip from Edward's daughter. Garcia said he was pretty confident that there are at least 5 to 7 more murders Edwards committed, and who knows beyond that. He gave a list of 15 confirmed and suspected victims, adding that he was less sure that Edwards was involved in the Zodiac killings. Retired homicide detective John Cameron speculated that Edwards was responsible for several high-profile cases, including the Zodiac killings in the Bay Area of California and the murder of John Benet Ramsey. He also claims there is evidence to suggest that Edwards is responsible for Jimmy Hoffa's death and Lacey Peterson. On April 7, 2011, Edward Wayne Edwards avoided execution by lethal injection. He died of natural causes. That's today's 10-minute murder, the brief and bingeable true crime podcast. Thanks for listening today, and if you have a story you'd like for me to talk about here on this podcast, email it to 10minutemurder@gmail.com. Connect with me on social media, and be sure to tell your friends that are into quick true crime stories like this about the podcast. Lastly, if you're an Apple Podcast user, be sure to leave a review and rate 5 stars. Doing that helps the show grow and reach more people. Plus, it's always nice to read kind words written by you guys that enjoy this podcast. Thank you for listening to 10 Minute Murder. Have a good night.